it like to collaborate with Lemmy? I mean, not just know him,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But you actually collaborated on music for yourself with Lemmy.
It was awesome. You know, I didn't when we first did the game track that was written by Jim Johnson and the WWE. I didn't know Lem at all, so when they did it, and it was a long process of me getting to the point where they were like, "Let's get Motorhead to do this."
I mean, obviously you were a fan.
Yeah,
forever.
huge,
Yeah,
huge,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that was the sound I wanted. The problem was they kept recording this version of the song, and I hated it. And they would say, "What do you want it to sound like?" And I would say, "Motorhead, much more like Motorhead." That raw, guttural sound, like that, you know, aggressive. And finally, they were like, "Well, we would just get Motorhead to do it," and because I didn't know that was an option. If I would have known that was an option in the beginning, I would have just said, "Let's get Motorhead to do it." And they agreed to do it. And then Lem, you know, didn't know anything about it. They sent him video of me and pictures and stuff. And he's like, "Okay, I can make that guy." He rewrote the song, did the stuff, and recorded it. It wasn't until later we met and a couple times, and you know, cordial and everything. And then I did a track with them on an album called Hammered for them. It's a track called Serial Killer. It's a spoken word piece. Lem called me and was like, "Hey, if we bring you out to L.A., would you do this track with me? I think our voices would sound cool, synced up together." Mm-hmm. And so I was like, "Yeah, I'll come and do it."
Of course I will, yeah.
So it was just a spoken word piece, but I sat in the studio with them for 2 days while they were making that album. And Lem had already finished all his bass tracks. So he was just there, and I was just waiting to do my stuff while everybody else, you know, Phil was, Mickey wasn't even there. Phil was doing his guitar stuff. Lem and I just sat on a couch in this living room for like 2 straight days and just became really good friends. Like it's hard for me to explain the relationship because he was obviously a lot older and in a different place, but we had this relationship just where like he'd call me out of the blue and it was like we'd been on the phone 5 minutes ago, but I hadn't talked to him in 3 months.
Isn't it interesting too what he was into? He was like a big World War II buff, like all this weird stuff you'd never.
Crazy historian, World War II. He was incredibly smart. You know, his lyrics, I think when you look at his lyrics, if you read into the lyrics, some of them are incredibly smart, some of them are incredibly tongue-in-cheek. Like,
Yeah.
he just made fun music, and he made music he liked, and but he was very, with Lem, what you saw was what he was. There was no, he didn't dress like that because that was how you were supposed to look as a rock star. That's just how he wanted to dress, and he acted a certain way, and the things he said, he had just a very simplistic way of looking at the world and life, and he had been through injuries. I remember the first thing that he said to me that really led us into having a conversation away from, because when we spoke, we hardly ever talked about wrestling, but away from music or anything else, he just said, "Hey, when you had your injury with your leg," he said, did you think your career was over? How'd you deal with that? Because, man, when they told me I was diabetic, I thought I was done. And, man, that really got in my head, and that started the conversation between the two of us in a different route. He would come to like the Staples Center. We'd be gonna have TV there or an event there. I'd get a call from Todd, or he'd leave me a message, Lemwood, and say, "Saw you're at Staples, gonna stop by." I'd get message that he was there. He'd pull in his limo. He'd have our production people wait. He wasn't like a huge fan, so he would sit in the car, and then before my match would come, they'd bring him out. He'd sit in the arena. I'd put him over when I went to the ring. I'd have my match. I'd usually lose. I'd go over to him. He'd go, "You're perfect for Motorhead. You never win." and then he'd say, "I'll be in the car." And I would get done the show. I'd go shower and stuff. 2 hours later, whatever, I'd come out. Limo'd still be underneath. He'd just be sitting in a limo. Most times just him. I'd go knock on the door. I'd get in the car. We'd sit in the car. Sometimes me, sometimes Regal, sometimes other people, but mostly me and him. And we'd just sit for a couple hours and just
That's awesome.
sit in the car and chat and talk about life. And he did that in London. He'd show up in London. Or, if we were in town, a couple times we'd stop by the Rainbow, and he and I would just sit. And one time he had him close it down just so he and I could just sit in there and just talk. And
That life stuff has to blow your mind. Like,
I learned so many things from Lem without him ever probably thinking he was ever teaching me anything, I guess, in a way. Like, but just being around him makes you think of things differently, and it's just a really cool process.
The stuff Rick Rubin did with Johnny Cash was really great. Did you ever see the video? You probably have for God's Gonna Cut You Down. It's this black and white video. I think they made it after Johnny Cash died, where they have all these interesting people, and they have one of the guys from ZZ Top making these weird cameos.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that stuff is crazy. And that Johnny Cash thing, so you talked about collaborating with Lemmy. So like when Lem was really sick, he got really sick, and then probably a year or two before he passed, but then he kind of made a comeback. And to use wrestling terms, he kicked out, made a comeback, and then he did well for a while and before he passed. And so during that time when he was really sick, I saw him in L.A., and we talked to him about doing some covers. And the Rick Rubin, Johnny Cash stuff was an inspiration to me because I love the voice and the things that they did that were different so much.
Yeah.
That we sat in the back of the Staples Center and started talking about, hey, what if you did some covers? And, we did this project together and we'll promote it. And, and he was really into it. And we had a deal created with the record label, and we started putting together a list of tracks, and I'll never forget it because Neil Lowy, our music guy, was in the room, and Lem at first was like, H, what do you mean? Like, what kind of music? And I'm like, Lem, some outside the box stuff, right? Like stuff that people would never think you would do, but yet your voice is so iconic that in those moments it's incredibly powerful. And I name off a couple of things, and then Neil goes, maybe even a rap track. And Lemmy's eyes bugged out of his head, and he was like, effing rap. I was like, Neil,
yeah, I got this here.
Stop. Yeah, like you're about to shut the whole deal down. Right?
He did good covers. Did you ever hear his cover of Shout It Out Loud, or a great one of Breaking the Law? Lemmy did great covers.
Oh, yeah, really good.
So interesting story, and this will sound like I'm not trying to take credit for anything here, but I'm just, it's because it's a fun story. And so we're sitting in that room, and one of the tracks I mentioned is Sympathy for the Devil. I said, and he was like, not a big Stones. Like, he's a big Beatles guy.
Yeah.
Wasn't a big Stones guy. And I'm like, man, to me, that song with your voice on it, Lem, like, you're the devil, right? Like, your voice, like, that is, I don't know. So I talk him into it. And it's the first one he does as that cover for this album that we were going to do that was all cover tracks. And he sends me a cut of it, like, I don't know, they go in and they record it a couple weeks later, and Todd, his manager, is sending us feedback like, dude, this thing is incredible. Everybody in the studio is freaking out about how good it is. Lem sends it over to me, and he leaves an entire verse of the song out, and I call him up, and I'm like, Lem, this sounds incredible, but like, you got to do the whole song, man. And he's like, the song is too long. I'm not singing the whole song. And I'm like, it's not the song. If you don't, everybody knows the song. You got to do the whole thing. Yeah. And, he's like, I'll think about it. And then Todd called, and finally he said because you want him to do it, he'll agree to do it. So they did it. They finished it. And then, like, everybody was freaking out. I mean, they've used that thing for commercials, all that stuff. And the other song that we had on the list was Bowie's Heroes.
Oh, it would have been amazing.
No, he did it.
Did he?
It's on
Have you heard that, Jim?
No, not Bowie's Heroes.
Oh, my God. So when we suggested it, we're in the room, and I was like, David Bowie, like, Heroes, you doing that song? He's like, I am not singing about dolphins. I'm not doing it. And I was like, Lem, rewrite the lyrics. Who cares? Like, put it in your words. But the song itself is so cool and iconic. And I could picture Phil doing it with the guitar. You got to listen to it. It's awesome. Lem rewrote the lyrics, and they did the track. They were supposed to do a whole bunch of them. And, towards the end, he knew. Right? He didn't know until he came back. And they told him, he went in because it was breaking down bad, and that's when they looked, they did the scan and said, dude, you got brain cancer, like, you're done. Like it's shocked that you're here. And, which, shocking that he'd been here probably for the last 30 years of his life. Yeah. But he knew, that run on the end. And, like, he did those tracks, but then they ended up putting them out on, like, Sympathy he put out on Bad Magic, I think the last album they did. They did the Undercover album. They did, I think that's where they put Heroes and stuff. But to the last, one of the last times I saw him, we did an interview with him. I asked him about doing an interview. I said, I didn't really say it in this manner, but I could tell. When I was talking to him, he was checking out. Not checking out in like he was off. Checking out in like, I'm at the end, dude. Like,
yeah.
When we would leave, it might be last time.
Yeah.
So I asked him about doing an interview, and he said, yeah. And at that time, he wasn't doing anything. And I brought Corey Graves with me because Corey Graves is a fan. I needed like somebody to ask questions because Lem and I would go off on this tangent and never talk about anything interesting except something to he and I. And we went to the Rainbow. It was closed. They just put me, Corey, and Lemmy. We've never put it out yet, but it's one of the last interviews that he's ever
Wow.
done. Yeah,
oh, yeah, you should put that out.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, it's something that we're talking about doing in this coming year. And we've just kind of been waiting for the right time. But it's one of the last interviews that he did, and it's amazing. But even at that meeting, so his manager Todd was there, and for like 20 minutes leaving as we're walking out, he is blistering Todd about the fact that they couldn't get all these covers on the album. And Todd is like, Lem, there's only so much space on a vinyl. Like, I can't put more stuff on there. I got to take a song off if you want to put another song on. And Lem is, I don't care. You're so full of crap. You could have got all these songs on that album, and it's bullshit. And he was so mad at Todd. We just talked about it the other day because they just sent me some stuff, and I was talking to Todd, and he was like, God, remember how mad he was at me for those covers not being on the album? And like, it was the funny. He dug the covers, and it was so, from a collaborative process, it was so like,
that's amazing,
fun doing stuff with him and kind of getting his take on it and getting him outside of the box and doing stuff. It was a lot of fun.